Hey guys, welcome back to Well That Didn't Work's Tabletop RPG Learning to Craft Terrain series. This week, we're going to change up our painting scheme, and we're going to take our raw textured foam, and we're going to turn it into granite. Stick around. If you've been following the series, then by now you probably have a small collection of sandstone tiles. But if you're like me, you've realized that sandstone isn't going to be the only playing surface that you're going to play on. So what we're going to do is change up the painting scheme, and we're going to go ahead and set this off to the side. And we're going to start working on granite. To do granite, you just need a dark gray and a light gray. And we're going to use the same painting technique that we used last week. So stick around. Let's take a look at what you're going to need for each step. We have our raw textured foam. Then we have our Mod Podge mixed with a little bit of gray paint. Then we move into our pewter gray paint. That's a wet brush. And then we move on to a granite gray paint that is also a wet brush, just a little lighter. Then we have a granite gray mixed with a drop of white paint. And then finally followed up by a dragon white. The last two steps will always be a dry brush. Here's a little bit of a better view for you as we walk back through the pewter gray, timeless gray, granite gray with a drop of white in it, and then followed up by a dragon white. First up, our pewter gray. I'm going to wet my brush after putting a little bit of paint onto just some spare canvas or some foam, whatever you have laying around. The purpose of wetting the brush is so that it thins the paint just enough to where it gets into all the cracks and crevices without covering up all the texture and the detail that you originally carved into the piece. If you've base coated using the Mod Podge with a mix of your primary color, in this case, the pewter gray, you don't have to worry about having extreme coverage at this point. And this is what it should look like. Allow it a few minutes to dry. Next up, we're going to repeat the same process, but we're going to use the timeless gray. Just drag your brush across, just enough to coat the top. Again, you're not trying to cover everything here. You do want some of the undercoat to shine through. And this is what you should look like. Give this a few minutes to dry. Next, we're going to take our granite gray. And this time, we're going to do a dry brush technique, but we're going to load the dry brush up without taking all of the paint off of it. We want to have a slightly heavier paint color here, just so that we make sure that when we brush in random directions, it creates additional highlights and brings out the texture. Ultimately, we're just not going for full coverage. And it should look something like this. Go ahead and give this about a minute or two to dry. Our last step is white paint. This we're going to do a full dry brush on. Go ahead and load up the white paint onto your brush and brush off as much as possible. Take your brush, hold it at about a 45-degree angle, and rub it across the top of the piece, and it should look something like this. All you're trying to do is highlight the texture. Give that a few minutes to dry, and then we're going to move on to the wash. Take a dark black wash, which is just a mix of water and paint and a little bit of dish soap, and be very, very liberal when applying this. Allow it to go ahead and pool up and let it dry as it sits. It should look something like this. Well, that's going to wrap things up for this episode. I hope you've continued to enjoy my journey so far. If you have, do me a favor. If you're not a subscriber, go ahead and click on that subscribe button. As soon as you do, hit that bell. It'll let you know anytime I have a new video that comes out. If you want to help support our channel's growth, there's a link to Patreon in the description below. Our community of backers gets additional live play content that's not available on YouTube, as well as being entered into some of our giveaways. Our current giveaway in June is for a custom-built dice tower, like this one, or the one that's just over my shoulder next to the first building that I built. And as always, keep on adventuring.